Thank you. Miss Jacqueline, thank you so much, Jacqueline, for coming. It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm saying already happy Woman Her Story Month to you.
Thank you.
Of course, you are, je dis dans langue créole, ou someone qui passe de présentation, meaning that by now everyone should know who Jacqueline Charles is. Your name is written all over social media, all over the newspapers. Anytime we're trying to find out what's going on in the news, of course, Miami Herald is one of our most reputable, newspapers within the diaspora and in Haiti, of course, because it's going around without limit. But today, like I said, it's definitely an honor and a pleasure to have you on a special day where we're celebrating women, and women like yourself do deserve the honor and the respect for your contribution to society, to our community, for being the pride and joy of the Haitian community. My dear, you deserve my utmost respect. And again, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to be with us on the first day where I'm launching Mo's Corner. Thank you for being my very first guest, my honored guest for this segment. Um, Jacqueline, please, for those who may not know who this wonderful woman that I'm talking about, who I have the pleasure of calling you my sister, my friend, um, tell them who Jacqueline Charles is, if you were to describe in your own words, because no one knows Jacqueline Charles better than yourself. So,
Wow. Well, first of all, let me just say, I have spent the last 6 hours trying to get a COVID vaccine. Okay.
I know you told me, did you get it? I know you've been.
No, I did not. I did not. I got up. Yesterday there was a site here in Miami, in Florida City, which was trending today. Everybody now knows where Florida City is. They basically opened up the gates. They said anybody 18 and over with a Florida ID. It was the one day I was not glued to my phone. I was not on WhatsApp. I was not checking social media because I actually decided to give that day to myself. Like I literally have been working almost like nonstop for 30 days.
You needed that me time.
That's but that me time cost me the COVID vaccine. So by the time I saw the message, there was just not enough time for me to go down south. It would have been an hour's drive. So today I got up and I went down there. I got down there about 9:30. And even though I am down there trying to get this vaccine for myself, I find myself working. I find myself tweeting. Are
you surprised? Are you surprised, Jacqueline? Are you surprised?
Exactly. So I say that to say that I'm always on. I'm always on. I mean, on Friday, I took Friday off, right, for some me time to get my hair done because I was gonna be seeing you, and I had to the scarf.
Girl, we've been talking about this hair business since 2 months ago. So, I know we've been preparing for this show. I'm like, how are we gonna do our hair? Right? It's a girl thing. It's a girl thing. It's normal. It's normal. Plus, remember, I told you it's gonna be very informal. We don't have to get all uptight. It's girl time. It's our time.
I'm answering your question because this is how people are gonna realize I'm there all day. You know how it is when you go into the hairdresser. You're black hairdresser, so you're sitting there spending a couple of hours. I'm still on my phone. I'm still working. My boss says, "So are you not taking a day off today?" I said, "Yeah, I'm taking a day off today to get my hair done." But I'm still working because I have stuff to be done. And literally, as soon as I finish, as soon as my hairdresser says, "Okay, Jacqueline, we're done," I get like a text and then boom, news breaks. Basically, I'm always on. I'm always on.
24/7. Even in your sleep, right?
Yeah, even in my sleep. So, okay. So who's Jacqueline Charles? So you guys heard, first of all, I hate the name Jackie. You will, yes, my Twitter ID says Jackie Charles because my name is very long. And when I tried to set my Twitter profile, it told me my name was too long and I could not do Jacqueline. And then you will see that there are people on Twitter that I have like slap back when they try to call me Jackie, because the reality is I have rules. None of my Haitian family can call me Jackie. None of my English family on the Turks and Caicos side can call me Jackie. But friends who have been my friends in America who've known me for years, they get a pass to call me Jackie because that's just the American way. But, my mother knows if she wants to annoy me and get me under my skin, she starts to call me Jackie, and I just do not respond to Jackie. And
you act like she's not even talking to you, right?
Exactly.
It's like, which one of those children is she calling? Like, did she have a new child in the house that I don't know about? Is that a new sibling?
Well, exactly. And you know how it is when you have Haitian parents, the way how they pronounce your name depends on how much trouble you're in.
Of course.
So yeah. So, okay. So people, who don't know me and like to make all kinds of preconceived idea of misconception. First and foremost, Jacqueline Charles is a Haitian Turks Islander. Okay. I was born in the Turks and Caicos. My mother is Haitian. I am Haitian. I don't care what anybody says. I don't believe that you need to be born in Haiti to be Haitian. But when people are, we have this idea where we think that the only Haitians in the diaspora are Haitian Americans, and that's it. Well, I'm here, like Wanda from Union Suite. We are actually Haitian Turks Islanders. We represent that other diaspora that's there. So I am an immigrant. I came to the United States with my Haitian mother, Cuban American stepfather, as a youngster. It was all new for me. It was all like, oh my gosh, what is this? I did not want to come. I literally thought I was coming on their honeymoon and I was going back. But there was something that amazing happened to me as a child growing up in the Turks and Caicos, which is a British dependent territory, which is that I was always introduced to my Haitian culture. My mother literally used to pull me out of school to go to Haiti. And I tell everybody, I have cousins in Haiti who do not know the entire family. Who wasn't born in Haiti, but I know my entire family. I know my grandparents. I was there for their funerals. I know all of my cousins. I mean, my mother made this her mission. It's who she is. So a few years ago, I remember my mother saying to me, "When did you get so Haitian?" I'm like, "You asking me? You should be asking yourself," because she was doing this education, this cultural education of introducing me to who I am. That she didn't even realize it. So I grew up in a time in Miami where kids were being called names for being Haitian. People were saying, "Oh, I'm not Haitian. I'm Canadian. I'm Bahamian."
Girl, don't take me back there.
Okay. So me, who had a perfect, legitimate right to say I am anything but, no, I was like, I am Haitian. And people are like, no, I'm Haitian. That's all. That's all you need to know, because that is what has defined me. A lot of my family is still, my mother's family is still there in Haiti. I tell people, listen, I can't get you no green card. I can't do anything for you. But, if a story that I write rights a wrong, if a story that I write raises a problem and brings some sort of correction, then I feel that I am doing my duty. People feel often that I have some sort of agenda. No, I don't. I tell people, listen, as a journalist, Haiti gives me high blood pressure. It gives me all of these angst. It gives me all kinds of, there's so many things.
Welcome to my world.
There's so many things that I could write about. And honestly, I started my career as a 14-year-old high school intern at the Miami Herald. I went away to college, UNC Chapel Hill. I was pre-med for my first 3 years, but I was too poor to stay in school. So yes, people, I am smart.
Wait a minute. How did we make that transition from med school to journalism?
You know what?
Your parents, your Haitian, knowing Haitian parents, your mother must have been furious. How do you leave med school to be in journalism?
My mother is still furious.
I know. You don't even have to tell me. I know.
Well, so I've always been interested in math and science, and that was, as a Haitian kid, this is what your parents tell you, right? You're gonna be a doctor. You're gonna be an engineer. My mother was like, "No, you're not gonna be a lawyer. They're professional liars." I'm like, okay. So I had an opportunity, and this is what happens. You're in school and you never know what's going to happen. So I happened to be in the gifted program in 9th grade, and my gifted teacher invited the executive editor from the Miami Herald to come and talk to us. And we spent weeks studying the newspaper, the different sections of the newspaper, and all of this. And so he was a white guy who was married to a black woman who was a columnist. Both of them, they were an interracial couple. They came there. And my school was an inner city school in Overtown in Miami. And so he started talking to us about the newspaper. So at the end of the conversation, they said, "Are there any questions?" And nobody had anything to say. And I just took this burden upon myself. I just said, oh my gosh, this guy is going to think that we're just a bunch of dumb inner city kids. This is just going to reinforce this stereotype. You know, he came. I mean, I don't know why I took this upon myself, but I did. And so I started asking him questions, and he assumed that I was interested in journalism. No, I'm not. I'm going to medical school. What are you talking about? So he tells us at the end that there's an internship program at the Miami Herald, but you have to be 16. And I was like, okay, good, because I'm 14. Thank you. Bye. That afternoon, he called my teacher back, Evelyn Wynn, God bless her. She passed away last year, and I wrote a piece about her. He called her, John Brecher, who is still alive. He's retired. He used to be the page one editor at the Wall Street Journal after he left the Miami Herald. And he told my editor, he says, listen, we are interviewing for new high school interns. I would like for you to bring that young lady, the one who was asking all the questions, the one who knows it.
Loudmouth one, right?
So my ninth grade gifted teacher drove me to the Miami Herald for my first ever job interview. And the only job that I've ever had, the only company that I've worked at, with the exception of internships at the New York Times and the Detroit Free Press in college. But yeah, so they took me there. I had to take the spelling and grammar test. And then they brought me into a room, this little tiny room, like the size of a closet. And they asked, so what do you like about the Miami Herald? And literally my mind went blank, right? I've spent weeks studying this newspaper, knowing all this stuff. And I'm like, oh. Every morning I get up and I watch Good Morning America, and I know if it's important, it's going to be on the front page of the Miami Herald. Listen, I have no idea where that answer came from, but the people in that room saw something in me, and they continued to see something in me while I continued to say, I'm going to medical school. I'm going to be a doctor. I spent the summer of my junior year in high school. I was at the University of Florida doing cell science research, working in a real lab, doing cell science. And I had to present that paper a couple of months later. And I'm still in my mind, I am science and math. No way, I'm not doing this writing thing. But they saw something. They honed it. And they continued to mentor me, and they pushed me my senior year to apply for the scholarship. That it was a nationwide scholarship to 3 students in the U.S. And it was run by the company that owned the Miami Herald at the time, Knight Ridder, which owned about 30 newspapers in the U.S. And I said I wasn't going to apply for it. And I had my whole life, out. I had my whole life planned. I knew where I was going to go, what I was going to do. I'd already accepted to go to University of Florida. And they just kept pushing. I said, okay, fine. I just need y'all to leave me alone. Okay, let me just apply. So this scholarship, it was a $20,000 scholarship, which at the time was a full ride to a lot of schools, especially state schools. And it was a guaranteed internship every summer, and then a job when you graduated, because by this point they've invested in you and they know that you're a hot commodity and everybody's going to try to grab you. So to guarantee that they get their monies back, you had to commit to work for them for at least a year. And so the rest was basically history, is what you say. I mean, I did it. I was in college. I was still pre-med. I was still doing journalism. I was the editor of the Black Ink newspaper, which was a Black student movement paper in Chapel Hill. And then I went to my internship in the Detroit Free Press my 3rd year. And I had an editor who just really, truly believed in me. I had veteran journalists of 10 years experience who were basically giving me the information, and I was the lead reporter on that story, and I was writing the story. When people show that kind of confidence in you, that's when you really know, like, you can do this, right? And that was what it was for me. There was that moment of, oh my gosh, like, I can do this, So that was it, and then the late Chuck Stone, God bless his soul. I had a really tough time with a journalism professor who I won't even get into details with, but it was a shocker for me coming from Miami. I came from an interracial household. I was intercultural, my mother being Haitian, my stepfather being Cuban, but he was also white. So for me, going to Chapel Hill was also a big shock because everything was black and white when my whole life up until that moment had been very multicultural. And I had a very tough time with this teacher, and I took copies of my work to Professor Stone. He looked at it, and I still remember it till this day. He was in the cafeteria, and he looked at it, and he's like, "Jackie," I'm like looking through your stuff. "You can write." I was like, "Huh? You can write." This teacher had stripped away so much of my confidence. So to have a professor tell you that, it's a life-changing moment. And so, and so the moral of all this is to anyone out there and to young people out there is that you're going to meet challenges in your life or moments where you're going to doubt yourself. And sometimes it just really takes somebody else who sees something that you don't see or you've forgotten about to really encourage you and to give you that courage and that strength to go on or to make that other turn. And we all, I think, as the children of Haitian parents, we go through that where our parents have our lives planned and we may want to do something else. And then you're always trying to think about, well, when do you have that conversation? And we're doing all of this dancing and all of this before we sort of drop the bomb on them. So imagine, my mom is from this era of Haiti. She lived through a dictatorship, journalism, absolutely no way. I remember being
female.
Yeah, I remember
No.
I was in like Cap Haitien, oh Cap, and I'm like, there was an election, and I said something, and my mother like snatched me in the door. "You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about this." So that was like also part of my introduction, and then I went the opposite way. So to answer your question, a very long-winded, Jacqueline Charles is someone who, have had a lot of wonderful opportunities in her life. She's had a lot of great mentors. She is a hard worker. I am just naturally curious, and I'm in a job that basically every morning that allows me to say, I wonder how, I wonder why. I wish I do have more time to write those stories that a lot of people wish more of, the cultural, the this, to that. But when you are a journalist, you are in the business of news. And when you have countries that are blowing up, or in my particular case, a country that is blowing up, because I really do cover I'm responsible for about 24 countries. I cover Haiti and the English-speaking Caribbean.
Wow.
But Haiti takes up 90% of my time, and when the news is happening and it doesn't give me the time to write those other pieces, believe me, I feel bad too. I want to write those other pieces, but you have to stay on top of the news. And so that's what we do. And I tell everybody, listen, I've covered education, I've covered state politics, I've covered social services, I've covered the Caribbean community here. Listen, Haiti is not, I'm not making my career off of Haiti. I covered so many other things, and I can cover so many other things. And that when I started my career, I used to put on my evaluation, oh yeah, I want to be the Caribbean correspondent at the Miami Herald. Well, the guy who was in that job had been in that job for over 30 years. And I was like, oh my God, this man's never going to leave. He's going to die in this job. And when he finally retired, and the job became open, guess what? I did not apply for the job because
Why not?
Because I was still having fun doing the other stuff that at that time I was the education reporter. I was writing about education. I was working on some investigations issues. And I wasn't, and you know what? To tell you the truth, the other part of it is you want people to come to you to actually do the job. When you go and chase something, sometimes you have very little leeway. And at the time, the job was actually covering the Caribbean and Central America. And I just really did not want that kind. At the time, Central America was coming out of the wars. So I've got Haiti on this end, and then I've got Central America on the other end. So something was going to give. And what was going to give is the Caribbean. At the end of the day, I am a Caribbean woman. Okay. That's what I am exposed to. That's what I grew up in, and I view myself as a bridge. I have the ability to create this bridge. When you're from the islands, we have an island mentality. We tend to think that we are islands unto ourselves. We don't see that we have so much more in common. So when I go to like these CARICOM meetings, they talk about Haiti. They're talking about the Haiti of 1804. They don't want to talk about the basket case of today. They don't want to talk about it today. But I represent Haiti of today. I represent that bridge. There are things that I see on my Haitian side, there's things that I see on my English side, and I'm like, hey, listen, y'all have more in common than you think. So when I approach stories, oftentimes, especially out of the English speaking Caribbean, what I try to show is how we are more alike than we are
Different.
You know. So I try to say that, you know, the scales of our issues, of our problems may be different, but if we're talking about corruption in Haiti, we got corruption in Jamaica. You know,
Mhm.
issues with healthcare and hospitals and the situation, we got that over here too. So I think for me is that the more we see our similarities, the more too that we can sort of tackle those problems. And I'm just in a very unique position to do it because, you know, having crossed all these islands, I got families all across the Caribbean, and also, you know, I tell people I'm Haitian and Turks Island by blood, but I'm Cuban by upbringing, because my stepfather was also very influential in my life from the time I was 3 months old, and so I, you know, that I grew up with the whole Fidel, you know, the communist, like, you know, all
Wow.
the things that annoys people about Cubans in Miami. That was my experience. That was my education, you know, because my
What
stuff
a mixture.
much, yeah.
What a
And
mixture.
I've always embraced the fact that I've been blessed to have that experience, that I can walk in these different worlds and these different lights, and I can see things from these different perspectives.
Have you ever traveled to Cuba, by the way?
Yes, I have. I have traveled. I've traveled to Cuba on several occasions. I had a stepsister in Cuba and showed up at her door, this little black child, and she was like, it was weird. It's a crazy story, but she knew exactly who I was. It was she had no idea that I was coming, and when I showed up in this town outside of Havana that was predominantly all white, I was like, oh, this is where all the white Cubans go to. And then I went there because I wanted to see her. She knew exactly who I was, and she knew about me, and we talked about, you know, my stepdad, my stepfather was one of these typical Cuban story, had supported Fidel and then realized that Fidel was not going to be the savior that he was, left Cuba, had all of his property confiscated by the Cuban government. His daughter at the time was in Miami when the revolution happened, but she decided instead to return back to Cuba. And so he lived this splintered family where he was in Miami, the daughter was in Cuba. They didn't talk for decades because they viewed, you know, Fidel, and they viewed Cuba through different lenses. And so at the end of his life is when you know, they made peace. But it's a shame because it was just all of these years between a father and a daughter, you know, that was lost because of politics and because of the revolution.
What are some comparisons have you been able to make in your coverages of stories about Haiti, in terms of its state of democracy, right? Because earlier you mentioned about how your mom tried to like kind of shut you up and like, girl, you don't talk about these things out here like that, like trying to protect you. And I can recall as a child myself, like there are certain things we weren't allowed to say during the Duvalier regime, right? Because that's the era that I grew up in. Because I came here back in the early '80s, and I didn't go back until 1986 after Jean-Claude left, of course. But I'm saying in today's generation and being a journalist, how free are you in your writing to be very expressive without getting any type of backlash as a woman?
I always get backlash. I think that, I think first and foremost, you know, Haiti is a very male dominated society. I'm always shocked by the language that people will say. You know, they'll say something to folks who know me, oh, you need to control her. And I'm like, huh? What are you talking about?
Control. Try again. Tell them try again. Not Jacqueline Charles.
Well, first and foremost, I tell people, you know, my mother is 100% Haitian. She is Haitian through and through. But there are some things about my mother that is very not Haitian, in the sense that she's a very, very independent, outspoken, you know,
You
I'm
are.
not going to take any crap from a man. You're not going to put me in my place, kind of deal. And it's interesting because my mother probably recognized this in me before I recognized it in myself. I think that when you grow up in America, you know, the whole sort of women's lib, bra burning, you think that that is sort of your education that you got in school, but you often don't realize that it's also it's your education that you also got at home, right? And so for me, I'm always sort of taken aback a little bit by that sort of Haitian male dominance that, you know, people have a problem with my mouth, you know, because I'm very forthright, and I am a profound believer. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, you know, how you speak to people. So I always speak to people with respect, but at the same time, I'm not just going to like just lie there and just take it. I think for me, first and foremost, when I approach my stories, I remember that Haiti's a young democracy. I think it's very easy for us to get frustrated, and rightfully so, that we are dealing with problems or issues 34 years, but it's only been 34 years. Yes, 34 years is a generation, but it's only been 34 years. So, you know, when you look at the the US and their democracy and how long that they've been at it, right? I think so that's part of my thing that makes me sane or keeps me sane at times, because it can get very depressing. But I also realize that people look to me for those, you know, moments of hope, that silver lining to tell them not to give up, even if there are periods where I want to give up. But, you know, first and foremost, I am a US trained journalist. I tell people I'm Haitian and I'm a journalist, but I'm not a Haitian journalist. And that's not in an offensive sense, but I'm not a Caribbean journalist. Okay? I am a US trained journalist. What does that mean? That means that I'm bounded by ethics, I'm bounded by codes, I'm bounded by a training. You know, there are lots of things that I may know, or I think I know, or I have a gut instinct. But at the end of the day, it's always about, can you prove it? You know, who's that source? Even if you're protecting that source. I live in a state, you know, with the Shield Law. Are you prepared to go to jail for that? Because you're not going to give that source up.
Where's the evidence?
I've had moments like those, and I've had that question asked to me from a lawyer. So that's what I am saying, is that, so it's not about sort of your freedom in terms of, but it's about fact checking, and it's about talking to multiple people, and it's about, you know, today in social media, everybody thinks that they're a journalist. So because they have a blog, they think that they're a journalist. That doesn't make you a journalist. I mean, it requires training. It requires knowledge. You know, it requires where you have to basically be in a situation where you're saying, wait a minute, there's libel and there's slander. Am I libeling somebody? Am I slandering somebody? You know, so you go into that with all of that. You know, I don't work for TMZ. No offense, but I don't. I'm not into sensationalism. You know, when we cover news, does the story advance the discussion, or am I rehashing something over and over again? One thing that people always say, you know, I love, is like, they want to be your friend because they think if they're your friend that they're going to get good press. And I always say to people, okay, you and I are friends. Well, you do something fabulous, and I write this fabulous story about you, and it's great and it's wonderful. And then 2 months from now, you go out and you kill somebody. And before you did it, you told me the whole thing and all of this, and now I got to write about it. So now I know all of the stuff, and so, but wait a minute, no, if I wrote this great, wonderful story about when you've been doing great things, and now you did something bad, and I know all this other stuff, that's why we don't need to be friends. This is, you want to approach it with objectivity. Anybody that I go to, I approach about a story, they should be entitled and feel that I don't have a preconceived idea or notion about something, and that it's going to be objective. And at the same time, I tell young reporters who are interested, because everybody's on social media and they want to put everything out on social media. I'm like, no, you know, I said, people, you know, they go out of their way, because as Haitians, we have very short memories. And, you know, I'm always tripping about this. I say, y'all forget, you forgot what I did 8 years ago. You forgot what I did 10 years ago, you know? But I don't come to it with any preconceived ideas. And I go out of my way. And if I'm human. If I have an opinion about something, reading my stories is not going to tell you how I feel. Because I'm conscious of that, you know. But when I approach a subject, I allow myself to be swayed one way or another by the argument. I'm not so like closed-minded. Oh, this person did it, or this is the way it is. Give me your best argument. You know, I can't make things up that you say. I can't put words in your mouth. Anything that I write, I have to defend it. But so, you know, I understand that, you know, in countries, whether it's Haiti or countries of young democracies, or we don't have strong institutions, you know, journalists don't always have that opportunity to say what they want to say or to write, or it can land them in jail. I mean, we have experienced this in this country where things have been difficult. You see what was happening when we were covering the Black Lives Matter. Our job as journalists is not to be the news. We don't want to be the news. And it's very easy for people to make us the scapegoat. It's very easy for people to, you know, to beat up on us. But for me, my whole deal is when I write something, I want to be able to stand by it. And if it's incorrect, okay, then you tell me that it's incorrect. I'm not out to get anybody. I don't say, oh, today I'm going to write a negative story about this. No, it doesn't work that way.
So let me ask you this one, Jackie. Are there any stories about Haiti where you have to do a coverage and you're like, no, this one is too shameful. Let me just I think I'll pass. Let me just cover another story today, because you know what? Enough of Haiti.
Okay, so that's a loaded question, right?
Yeah.
There are stories that you approach, and I'm going through this right now. There's a story that I'm trying to think about the ultimate ramification of this story. And at the end of the day, I need to be able to sleep with myself. I need to be okay. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Stories that, you know, is it going to put somebody in harm's way? Is it going to, you know, make them worse? So I'm not a cutthroat journalist. I'm human. I know people think I'm cutthroat, but I'm actually.
What is a cutthroat journalist? Like, is it someone that's you tell it like it is, raw, uncensored? You know what? I don't care if I'm not sparing your feelings. You're a thief. I'm just gonna write it, you know. Yeah.
Let the chips fall where they may. I'm gonna go after this. Let the chips fall where they may. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's take an example. So when a certain president referred to Haiti as an it-hole.
Mm-hmm.
You know, could I have done a story about all the trash and the garbage and why we can't clean up Port-au-Prince?
Yeah. This is where I would
okay, so now you're hitting on why people hate me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people hate me.
Mm-hmm.
I translate the Creole to English.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just about translating the Creole to English. We have these conversations among ourselves in the family, and then I put it out there in the public, and that's what people hate. But this is what people forget, though. It's like, first of all, today, we are living in a world of social media. And just Creole on Twitter, you're thinking like other people are not going to hit the translate.
It does automatically anyway.
I love it. Like somebody will go on the radio and they make some scathing remarks, right? And they're like, "Oh, we say Jacqueline shot, huh? He said." Like all of a sudden they're like backpedaling. They're changing. No. But you were just on this radio station and you just said this, and I heard you. So let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So for an American paper, you're gonna watch what you say because you're not gonna be libelous or slanderous. But because you're in Haiti and because we're all in the family, so you deal with these kind of deals. It's not. Yes, I do get tired sometimes in terms of Haiti. I'm human. Like sometimes the news becomes too much. Okay. Mm-hmm. Last week, for real, I up until that story on Friday, y'all really didn't see much from me about Haiti because I've been working on COVID stuff. This is 1 year anniversary of COVID. And I needed to focus on that. But sometimes it becomes very daunting, you know, and sometimes you just can't, you can't ignore it. You're trying to ignore it, and you hear there's some guy who's never been born in Haiti just got put on an ICE flight, and he's been, you know, deported back to Haiti, and you're like, oh my God, I got to jump on this, because news is news. And when it happens, you know, I love like my Caribbean people when they will send me the press release a week after something happened or after the fact. I'm like, that train has already left. We're already on to something else right now. So you know, so it's not about, I'm not gonna do that story. It's about in what context do you do that story? Because remember, I have multiple audience. I have the Haitians in Haiti, I have the Haitians in Miami, I have the non-Haitians in Haiti, the non-Haitians, you know, out of Haiti. So how do you balance that? Last week, let's take an example with the Arnell. Okay, so we had the prison break, and I had his video that we had on a story. So the video, when you're on social media, the video looks like a photo, right? But when you open the story, you see that it's a video. But you see that his eyes was open. Nobody had nothing to say. This was the second time that I used it. Everybody was fine. The next day, we had notorious gang leader dead. More than 400 missing. Oh my God. People, some of them were African Americans, some of them, of course, Haitians too, were like sending these emails to my bosses, flooding them up. I mean, a few of them probably demanded my firing. Somebody accused me of disrespecting Black History Month because I used this photo and all of this. And I had to say to this woman, I said, listen, let me just keep it real. Okay. And she was not actually Haitian. I said, people are upset because the news keeps being negative and I keep getting blamed for the bad news. I do not create news. It's not me. And by the way, this is the third time that I used that photo and nobody said anything the other 2 times. And it's actually a video, but it's like people, you know, people just only read headlines. And the reality is that that Friday, when I saw that people were not reading the story and just making the connection between the headline and that photo and assuming this was a picture of his corpse, I switched the photos out. But you know how social media go. But I had to tell this woman, I said, but let me tell you something. I said, I had the photos of his corpse and decided not to use it. I also had the photos of the corpse inside the jail. And for now, I decided not to use it, but I may come back and use it because I have an audience that needs to see it to believe it. And if I'm going to write about the horrible conditions inside the prison system in Haiti, people need to see this for themselves. In 2008, I have 4 back-to-back hurricanes right after each other. I had kids malnourished and dying, and I had a school collapse. I was there for all of them. I remember I came back from Haiti on Monday. Tuesday morning, I was back on a plane to Haiti for the next crisis.
Wow.
When we got to the storm, the 3rd hurricane, I was in Cabaret. One river brought down old people, another river brought down children. When I got to where the children were, it was like 24 kids, bloated, looking like porcelain dolls, all of them dead. And this father came who had spent all morning trying to find his 5-year-old, finally found her, came there, was holding this girl up and was begging us to take this picture because he wanted the world to see what he had just lost and what his suffering was. That I live in a country that could not even protect me from a rain. Like this is what happened. And I will tell you, we had a discussion and we decided to run that picture of him holding up his dead child because it wasn't about the photo. It wasn't about selling an image. It was about the fact that this place had just lived this horrible moment, 4 hurricanes in 30 days. And this had symbolized the loss. And I will tell you, 2 weeks before that, I had done a story about, I call them carnival babies, but it was about the maternity hospital in Port-au-Prince, where we were 9 months after Carnival. So all these women were literally popping out babies. They were like literally flying across the room with, you know, no medication, no nothing. And this hospital that was run by Médecins Sans Frontières was about to close because they had lost their funding.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and then there was some pictures, and then we had access to the delivery room. And in one of the pictures, you could see, you know, a woman's, some of her private pubic hair, deal. And I put my foot down and I said, no. I said,
Wow.
somebody, I said, if this was your wife laid up in a public hospital, you would not find this to be acceptable. And for me, it was that, when we go to Africa and women are breast, without a top, it's called, geography is called, all right. But in the United States, it's called pornography.
Pornography.
Exactly. So for me, I was like, no, there are other ways that you can tell that, you can depict that, and we need to maintain the dignity. So these are conversations that we continue to have in our newsrooms. So for the people who are upset by the negative images, I get it, but sometimes that negative image is needed to further illustrate the story, because I still have people who don't believe that there were more than 300,000 people who died during the earthquake.
Okay.
Okay.
You know what? Speaking of that, and I'm thinking about all these different stories that you've covered, because I read your stuff all the time. You know me. I'm just, I love you. You're my girl. I love you. But and I'm saying to myself, because I know you. If anybody were to ask me, describe Jackie Charles, what type of adjectives would you use? I'd say bold, audacious. Strong. Anything but somebody that's weak, that's gonna cave in, somebody that's gonna give up. You're a pillar. You know what you're doing. You're professional, and by now you've mastered the art of journalism.
I don't know, girl. I still struggle with stories.
You're still human, and
I'm asking myself: are there days that you wake up out of your bed and you're like, oh God, and you're haunted by the visual representations that you see, or the circumstances of a people in agony, people being persecuted, people who are striving, people who would love to stay home on a land that is theirs, a land that our forefathers have fought for them to have liberty and justice. Yet they have to travel to other countries to be subject to humiliation and all types of injustice, right? And you're describing that man again with the baby, holding up his baby, asking you to please take a picture of his baby. And I'm imagining myself, at which point do you go and say to yourself, wow, did I just cover that? Was I actually on the road today and I accomplished all of those in a professional manner without losing it, without breaking down, and maintained my professionalism and still smile like everything's okay and still find a way to comfort this man that's, in distress? Where do you draw the line as a human, versus a professional, versus that journalist that has to cover the story that everyone is expecting to read about it the next morning? So but when you get home and now you gotta write, and then you're sitting there reminiscing about your day, that this whole coverage that you have to do is like
you develop a sense of detachment. So I will tell you this. I'm the person that when my oldest sister died and I went to the funeral, I literally passed out in front of the entire government of the Turks and Caicos, okay? My mother will tell anybody she doesn't do caskets. Don't have her. She's not going to go look at the body in the casket. But from my coverage that I've seen a lot of more. I've seen a lot of dead bodies.
Of course.
When the earthquake happened at one point, I remember they wanted us to go talk to somebody, about PTSD. And I'm like, I'm Haitian. I'm not going on nobody's couch. But I can tell you it's real. I mean, I haven't even tougher times with funerals of people that I know if there's a personal connection, because, I can see a mountain high of bodies, of dead bodies, and it doesn't phase.
Because you don't know them.
I don't know them, but it's different when you know the person. But at one point, one of my friends and colleagues, I remember after the earthquake, who knows me well and knows that, I'm like, I'm one of people watch TV and you start crying, you don't even know the people. And she said to me, have you cried? I said, no. And she could not believe that I had not cried.
Yeah, you're cold,
And
right? That's what she's
you're cold,
thinking.
right? No. And so she kept pushing and pushing and asking, and that it was trying to make me feel like maybe something was wrong with me, right? So I have a friend that you know was there and was among the first responders. He's a doctor, and he had to go out and saw the reaction to people who was running off and all of this stuff. And I said, I need to ask you something. He said, okay. I said, did you cry? Have you cried? And he said, no. And then I said, why not? And he said, and he answered my question. And this is what I tell everybody. Because if I start to cry, I will never stop crying.
Wow.
And that's Haiti. If I start to cry, I will never stop crying. And then I can't do my job. And then I can't have that level of objectivity. I can't see beyond that moment of here and now. But there are 2 times when I did cry. The first time was in 2008 when I went to the top of the mountain in the southeast in Jacmel, and children were dying from malnutrition. And I remember my colleague, the photographer, not thinking that it was going to be an interesting photo and not wanting to go. And I'm like, children are dying, we need to go. And when I got up there, Zoranger, I remember, the rocks, the soil was so bad that the rocks were coming out of the soil. And, you know, when people talk in Haiti about, oh, you have to walk 3-4 hours for water, and sometimes we think it's exaggerating. You had to walk 3-4 hours for water. There was no clinic.
That's Haiti.
And what I realized is that these mothers who were growing stuff around, jardin, whatever, but the stuff had no nutritional value. They were literally feeding their children to death. They were feeding their children carrots. They were feeding their children potato. Whatever it is they were feeding their children, it had no nutritional value because the soil was so bad. And the idea that a mother is doing what she's supposed to be doing, which is supposed to be feeding her child, and you had no idea that with every spoonful, this child was just wasting away and wasting away and wasting away. Doctors Without Borders had to send helicopters there to get the children and then bring them to Port-au-Prince, gave them peanut butter for a couple of weeks, sent them back there, and the cycle just repeated and repeated. I cried. When I got there and I realized the magnitude of what I was looking at and the magnitude of what was happening, and the fact that the parents had no idea, I cried. And then the second time I cried was 2008. The second time was like 2015, I think it was. I did a story about abortion in Haiti. And the whole idea was how abortion was illegal, but you go down to town, Port-au-Prince, there are all of these abortion clinics, all over the place. And I had to find it was for a project, and I had to find young girls who had attempted abortions and to have them tell their story. And I happened to find 2 young women who I'm still in touch with today, and they almost died trying to get an abortion. But one girl, she ended up pregnant because she wanted to go to school. Every year, this girl was trying to get her certificate. There was something. She didn't have a birth certificate. This didn't happen. That didn't happen. So at one point, she put in her mind, well, the only way I'm going to be able to get an education is I got to find a man to finance his education. And she literally was like interviewing guys, right? To make sure that, you're going to do right by me. Here's what I want to do. I want to go to school. So I'm looking for a menage, but I'm just not looking for any kind of dude. I'm looking for a dude that's going to finance my schooling, pay for my school fees, do all this stuff. So she settles on this one guy, and then the first time they sleep together, he gets her pregnant. And I said it, he got her pregnant because yes, it takes two, but based on how this whole deal, to me, it was like, I felt like it was intentional. And she then sent a friend out to go buy this pill that's very common in Haiti. And it just turns out she may have gotten a bad batch, and this girl almost bled to death.
Wow.
And when the idea that this girl almost died, not because she wanted a Gucci bag, not because she wanted, some nice clothes, but just wanted an education, I cried.
Yeah.
So it's still, it's not always the things. Yes, there are a lot of sad stories, and you can cry all the time. But I tell everybody, and I always describe Haiti like this to everyone. Haiti is like a blind man. You meet this blind man in his environment, and you go in and you start feeling sorry for him. And all of a sudden you start moving around everything in his room because you've decided that the way he functions and how it functions, that's not good. But you have no intention to be there for the long term. So while you're moving things around in the room and you're there, he's good, right? He can do this, he can do that, whatever. But then you leave. And when you leave, now his world is completely upside down. You've given him all of these expectations. You have no intentions on helping it. And so what have you done? You have now made it worse because he has a routine. He has a way of doing things.
Yeah.
It is not our job. We have to remember that we are privileged. Whether, the mere fact that we have a visa or we have a passport that's other, or we live in the States, you can always leave. But this is a country of 11 million people and most people cannot leave. And so feeling sorry for them or changing their world and turning it upside down or not being there for the long run, you're not doing them any favors. You're only making yourself feel better. So that is how I always approach it, as a journalist, there are things that, ethically, I can't do. And we've talked about this, right? You're in the middle of a disaster and you have your pen and paper and something happens, do you throw that paper away and you get involved and you start helping them dig out? Everything has to be in the moment, right?
Yes.
Like you make those decisions, but my job is not to be there to be like digging stuff out from under the rubble. You're recording it, but if I'm standing there and the rock is about to fall on the person, I'm the only person that can stop it. Yeah, you better throw away you better throw away
your pen and your pad.
Do it to save a life. But my job is not to, I have friends that go on, on charity trips and all of these events, and I welcome it. And if my story moves you to do that and to be more involved and to find a way to be involved, that's my contribution. That's my contribution. And my contribution is also in the sense that, yes, while I'm translating Creole, I'm translating the nuance, I'm translating the culture. I feel that I'm privileged in that sense that I'm not working through an interpreter. There are things that we do. There's mannerisms that we have that's, we're we have a way of speaking without speaking. So how do you translate that to the outside world and put that, out there? So yes, people they're not always going to like what I write, but I hope they respect it. I hope they respect the fact that I work for a newspaper in a country that increasingly is pulling back on foreign news, and it's not cheap to have a foreign journalist. And yet the Miami Herald remains committed to this. They remain committed to have me covering. I can be covering anything else, and Lord knows there's a lot of other beats, that they can use my services on. But we're not getting any more money than because we cover Haiti. I would love for everybody to be a subscriber because we need subscriptions. But I will tell you, there are times that I look and I see the stories that people are clicking on and they decide, okay, I'm going to be a Miami Herald subscriber. They're not the Shocking Charles story because people always end up taking my stories, copy and paste and sending it around. Those numbers don't necessarily reflect my audience. But sometimes when people say, "Oh yeah, CNN is doing this," but I'm like, "But I've been there every day. I'm there every week." you know. And I have to remind myself that sometimes, yeah, we take our own for, for granted. But I'm not parachuting in to a country. I don't parachute in.
Wow. So, Jackie, my last question for you. I mean, actually, I have two last questions for you. What does it feel like to be Jacqueline Charles? You're walking into a place and the spotlight is on you. And knowing you, and you and I kind of have similarities, similar
approaches to life. Like we're very animated people. We walk into a room and it's like, look, you don't have to hold my hand. I'll find my way around. I'm good. We have that level of self confidence. Like, you're not gonna destroy my mood. I left my house with a positive attitude. I'm just gonna do me. Later for you. That's you and I. And that's why we click, right? Um, but what does it feel like really for you to walk into a room and full of males, and here comes this female, and they find you intimidating?
Is that why I'm still single?
Yes, honey.
Well, first of
That's
all,
my story.
I love my compa, and before COVID, I would go to my balls, and people like, well, what do you do? I'm like, oh, I collect paper. What do you mean I collect paper? I mean, I like to go out and I like to party with my friends, and I'm not trying to be Jacqueline Charles or who people think is Jacqueline Charles. I like to be a fly on the wall. I don't like the spotlight. I don't like the attention. I'm just like a nerd that just like, do my thing, do my work, do what I have to. I'm not interested in being a celebrity. I'm not interested in being the news.
It comes with the territory. You're Jacqueline Charles. I'm sorry.
This is my story, my trajectory, where I am and how I got to where I am is the story of Haitian immigration. It's the story of the Haitian immigrant. Not every Haitian came from Haiti directly to South Florida and, on a boat or flew to New York on a plane. There were some Haitians who went to the Turks and Caicos and they went to the Bahamas. You asked me earlier about, stories that I won't do. I won't go into specifics, but there are some stories in some places that when I visit them, I get angry and I get rude and I just basically like, you know what? Nah, I'm not gonna go there, because if I go there, I'm just gonna continue to write about the same old story about. I don't like to see us humiliated and repeatedly, and there are some places where we continue to suffer this sort of humiliation. I love the fact that our story at least in South Florida, is we went from boat people to taxi drivers to elected officials, and today we are the parents of doctors and nurses, and we've moved from Little Haiti to North Miami to Pembroke Pines and Weston. That is our story in America, but so for me, I'm just me. This is why, like, my group of close friends, they aren't necessarily newspaper readers. They often don't even read my stories. They're like your typical Haitian. They don't heard something on the radio and then they think they know, or they're like, was it Paul? They don't believe it, so they start telling you this stuff. I'm like, are you serious, really? But that keeps it humble for me. That keeps it real, because I'm not interested in that. Yes, people are intimidated. I think in America, oftentimes males are just intimidated by professional, smart, intelligent women. I am intelligent. I've always been intelligent. Before I was even a journalist, I was intelligent. Maybe I've gotten less intelligent as a journalist, but I've always known that I've been, I was smart. That's how I grew up. That's what I know about myself. And I'm like, and if you're intimidated by that, then, it is what it is. But I have walked into a room, into a party, I've seen my sources, and I've turned around and I walked out, because you're right. I don't need you to see me partying. And I want you to say, okay, she's fierce and she's to be feared. I don't, what you see with me is what you get.
Sounds like Mona Lisa to you. Got it.
On the radio at times.
Yes. It's funny how one of my male friends called me one time. He says, Mona Lisa, you know what the problem is with you? The males across the diaspora are intimidated by you, and then the women, they hate your guts. They're just jealous of you. I said, for what? I said, I stay in my shell. I'm minding my business. I mean, what do I do to people for them to? He says, you don't understand. It's just your personality, something about you. I said, but when I walk into a place, I barely say anything. I'm
Yeah.
usually quiet. He said, you don't have to say anything. You're so loud. I said, okay. He said, stop being stupid. You're smarter than that. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I said, oh, yeah, what you're describing to me is Jack and Charles. I did say that to him. I say, yep, that sounds like Jack and Charles. Because I listen, I could just remember the last time you and I were in DC together, and I'm like, here we go. We're walking across, we each holding up hers, and it's like,
Wait, our Haitian design first.
a Haitian design bag, and I'm looking at myself. You look at me, I look at you, and we're looking at ourselves. We're like, girl, and we just keep it moving. But it's like you could tell everybody, in our surrounding just turn around and say, look at these two. Like we didn't even say much, right?
It's just,
But we just made a simple fashion statement, and that was loud enough to attract everybody coming to you, coming to me. Where did you get this bag? Where did you get this?
yeah.
Where did you get that? So usually, sometimes it's the simplest thing about you that may intimidate someone else without you even having the intentions of doing that. So
It's like when you're a kid, you go to your parent, like, well, why does this person like me?
yeah, it's like I'm such a nice person. Like
but as an adult, you're like, okay, whatever.
I'm not that I don't really care whether people like me or not. I'm not an attention seeker like that. It's like you like me, fine. You don't. I'm a Scorpio. Go ahead, keep it moving. Fine, I'm fine. But in most corner, that's one of the subjects that we're going to be talking about. Professional women who are ready, who got what it takes, and yet you're looking for a mate, and yet men are intimidated by your intellect. They're intimidated because you're secured within your skin. You're secured with who you are. I am Jacqueline Charles, and that's it. Like, why do you want to come and destabilize who I am, my whole being?
Well,
Like, why do
okay.
you want to change me into? Do you understand? And you're like, no, you're not doing that.
Yeah, mentally they try to get into they try to get into your head, and that is I always tell you, I have like little nieces and nephews, and I say at the end of the day, all you have is your confidence. You have your confidence, you have your sense of self, and don't
Mhm.
let anybody take that away for you, or let you feel like there's something wrong with that. Um,
Mhm.
and that for me is something that I've always had instilled in me. So it's like, I'm sorry, well, that's your problem.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you have to, so
How
not
do we educate our men though, like to accept us as is? I can just don't be intimidated by my appearance. Try to get to know me, and then
this is a whole other show, right? The Haitian.
I know. I'm opening a whole can of worms, but
Uh, I just think that there is issues that what I have found is that there are things that guys, they like what they like, they also dislike.
mhm.
The
Yeah,
like they dislike, like the fact that you're bold and you say it's okay as long as it's not directed, at me. When you have that moment, I may play stupid, but I ain't stupid, kind of.
exactly.
But and again, like I'm telling you, I grew up in this multicultural household, which I love. But one of the things I did not like about it is, my mother always having to explain why she had to do certain things, why she had to send money to Haiti, why she was, so that always having to translate my culture for others who are outside of the culture. That was something too that I knew early on that I really didn't kind of want to deal with. But it's tough. But listen, you can't apologize for who you are. I mean, I have to believe that there's somebody out there for everybody, and there's somebody out there that is going to, welcome and embrace that part of your personality and not try to change it, not
Mhm.
try to be mentally destabilizing, because honestly, that's what you want. You want somebody that's going to walk side by side, not
That's
in
right.
front of you, not behind you, and somebody who is secure in themselves. Unfortunately, I think one of the worst things is, a partner, whether it's a man or a female, who is just not secure in themselves, because you spend so much of your energy, so much of your time trying to make them feel like they're important and trying to give them this security that you just can't give them, because there's a clock on that. If you didn't get it at a certain point, what can I do about you?
Yeah. So, Jackie, we got to come to a close. I know time flies so fast when we're having fun. So, if you had your last words of wisdom to tell anybody that may want to either venture into journalism, or if it's actually a twofold question, this last piece of wisdom is gonna be to the diaspora who's sitting here thinking they're the savior of Haiti.
Yeah. One of the things that saddens me is that it saddens me and it warms my heart at the same time, right? We have this generation of young people who don't need the Wycliffe moment that we all had walking across the stage and saying, okay, it's okay now to say I'm Haitian, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know that they're Haitian, or somebody told them they're Haitian, and so they are in search of this Haitian identity in terms of what it means. But yet they don't know the history, they don't know the struggle, and they don't have the connection. So while their parents are sending money to Haiti, and you're paying for funerals, and you're paying for weddings, and you're paying for this schooling and all of this stuff, they don't have that connection, and they don't feel that sense of responsibility to do it. So we're going to get to a point where you're going to have this really large diaspora outside of Haiti, but you're not going to have those remittances or those ties, that are coming in. And I think that this is where we have to be real about where we are in this lifetime and in this crossroads. And we have to be honest about ourselves, stop shooting the messenger, me, like, and others, because we're going to, because we criticize and we talk about stuff where, on some, we're always going our own way. We're always trying to one up the other. Like, we really need to figure out sort of, what do we want this country to go? What do we want for ourselves as a community? And, and how do we get there? How do we get there? And who is going to be the sacrificial lambs? Because every time one of these older democracy fighters dies, a piece of my heart breaks, because I'm like, my gosh, they made all of these sacrifices. They did all of these things. And at the end of the day, the country isn't much better. It's actually probably worse to some degree than when they started their fight. But I have to hold hope that there, you got to hit rock bottom to, the phoenix rises from the ashes. And I do believe that we will rise from the ashes. And the one thing that I will say to you is, something that my mother says, who, freaks out every time I go to Haiti, is still not okay with this thing I call journalism that I chose as a career. And she says, but one man a country doesn't make. So it means that Haiti is larger than an individual. And as much as all of these crazy things that we're dealing with today in the reality, there is still something about that place that draws you. There's still something about that place that says, you need to come, you need to be there.
Yes.
So that is what I would say, that, we have to remember that we have a history, and yes, we have struggle. But going forward, what do we do with that history and that struggle? And how do we start to define our own path? What is our little contribution to Haiti? What is it going to be?
Jackie, I would truly be remiss if I didn't ask that last burning question. That's like my favorite question, especially after what just transpired this week with one of our sisters in New York in media. It's the year 2099, and Jackie is leaving this world. How do you wish people to remember Jackie?
She was fierce. She was bold. She was a hard worker, and she truly tried to make a difference.
Would you feel that sense of accomplishment Do you feel like you're working towards that goal? Are you heading there at the speed that you're contributing to society right now? Because
Every time,
sometimes you don't give yourself the credit that others give you, and that's why I'm asking that question.
no, every time I do a story, every time I write about something, it's my little contribution. It's not about awards. It's not about the accolades. It's not about people recognizing. It's about, it's you get up in the morning and then you're getting ready to go to sleep at night and you say, what did I do today? What was my contribution today?
Yeah, but when you pick up a position paper and you look at the bottom of it and they're making reference to the Miami Herald by Jacqueline Charles.
I'm embarrassed.
What?
Embarrassed. I'm like, oh my God. Again, because I tell you that it's not about me doing the spotlight, but I'm gonna tell you, but I'm gonna tell you the moment where I'm not embarrassed. When I write about a kid that has cancer and his mom was told that children in Haiti don't get cancer and he gets turned away. And yeah, he eventually dies, but you know what? His death wasn't in vain because somewhere along that journey from when I started to write about him to when he died, and this is my kid Julie, I had doctors who never thought about working together decide that they're going to work together so they can start treating young kids in Haiti with cancer who are over the age of 14 to prevent another Julie. It's not $1 million into it. It's not like a building that's going up. It's one doctor deciding to take another young Haitian doctor, training her and saying, here's my contribution. And you know what? That is something that Jacqueline Charles can claim and will claim, because had I not written that story, had I, not stayed on top of it, maybe it would have happened eventually, but it wouldn't have happened when it happened. Those are the
Wow.
that warms my heart. Yes, it's nice to see members of Congress. They tweet, they put your stories in, but I'm like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. I've been writing too much or whatever. I don't want to be the spotlight. I don't want to be, the person. What I want to do is I want to make real change, real difference in individual lives. I like to tell the stories of underreported communities and underreported people, and they're not pretty, and they're not splashy. They are ugly, they are hard, they are complicated, but they are our story. And if that story is going to make somebody do something differently, think differently, change something, I'll take the hits.
Mm. Jacqueline, I have no words. I have no words. On my very first show with Most Corner, to have you. You made my day. Thank you so much. Happy Woman Her Story Month to you. And we hope someday that after this COVID is over, that we can get together and have
Thank you, and I'm glad you're
real
doing it.
fun and be real human again. And please, you're needed on this platform. This platform is created for women, and trust me, we need to have more talks and more conversations. And I hope you understand what you mean to the younger generation, because they're looking up to you. They're looking up to me, and we would be useless if we didn't leave on some type of legacy. So we got to start grooming the next sets of Jacqueline Charles for the next, few years coming down the line, because we're not here to stay. We're going to be leaving eventually.
First, I thought I was immortal.
Our work will be in vain if we don't build bridges over the generations. And that's what my work is all about. Trust me, whether I'm teaching in the classroom or I'm doing this here, it's all about educating, informing a community, empowering women, empowering young girls, and that's all I'm interested in doing. And trust me, I'm sure our audience learned a whole lot from you. A lot of people who've been wondering, who's Jacqueline Charles, and when I said you were coming, trust me, you'll get the reports of how many people were watching, because there's a YouTube video that's coming out of this. With so many platforms, and they're waiting for that YouTube video. So you will get the feedback, and please do make time in your schedule to come back again and sit with some of our other females in media, because they would love to pick your brain.
I love Winnie. I mean, she is so great and wonderful, and I've watched her.
Did she leave? Because I told her to stay around, but she disappeared.
Yeah, so no, I just wanted I want to thank you for doing this. Not for me, but for definitely for, for
Oh,
other
she's here. Really?
yeah. So
Girl, I told you could have stayed and enjoyed Jackie with me,
No, I love Jacqueline Charles. I love her work. And
oh, I love you too.
And you can tell the love is mutual because obviously she was not leaving without saying goodbye to you. She said she wished you had stayed, and I'm saying the same thing.
She was there. She was like,
you were. Yeah, because you disappeared, and I said, where did she go? Because I told her she could stay.
No, I just mute myself so I don't hear the dog barking. But this conversation, okay, I'm gonna watch it over and over. And
no. Oh, I know, girl. Listen, you talk about you. If you don't think I'm gonna watch this again before I go to bed tonight, think again.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. This was a blessing. Both of you ladies were a blessing to me today. As we're celebrating women. And you guys deserve all my utmost respect. When I say my utmost respect, I truly mean it from the bottom of my heart. Knowing the challenges that you guys have to face, knowing the disrespect sometimes that us women who are intelligent that we get, because people feeling intimidated or feeling some type of way because we are who we are. But guess what? That's not going to stop us from being who we are and doing what we do. So on that note, ladies, once again, I wish you a happy Woman Her Story Month. It's your story. It's my story. It's Jacqueline's story. It's Gabby's story. It's all of our stories. So tomorrow, as we're celebrating, I'll be thinking about you guys. I truly enjoyed the moment that I spent with you, and I'm sure Johnny did too, and I can speak on his behalf. I can dare do that. But ladies, I will not stop smiling. Truly, I'm feeling like Mona Lisa today because I'll be smiling cheek to cheek. Thanks to you. Thank you for blessing me with your presence.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merci.
Le Mojo Show vient joindre nous aujourd'hui grâce à support Cap Lamandou l'hôtel qui établi dans ville Jacmel ak Villa Théodore qui chita dans mi-temps Port-au-Prince dans quartier Debussy. Si ou à Jacmel, ou soit au Port-au-Prince pour vacances, ou soit pour business, et puis vous voulez descendre dans l'hôtel, côté ou à l'aise qu'on met Blaise, seul choix c'est Cap Lamandou dans Jacmel ak Villa Théodore dans Debussy. Ou ka contacter yo directement sur site web yo caplamandou.com ou soit villatheodore.com. Les Mojo Show voulait remercier John Laguerre qui c'est un supporter fidèle show. John Laguerre, c'est un professionnel qui ka répondre à tout besoin financier nous tant que assurance santé et assurance la vie. Pas quitter ces les mal arrivé pour nous dire si nous te connaît. Contactez John Laguerre dans 347 204 58 61. 347 204 58 61.
I never found someone like you.